Hi.
Hi, I'm Chris.
And I'm Ann, and this is Lifestyle Business on LPTV. Welcome. We have a great show today. First up, we're going to speak with Bruce Katz. He is actually a legend when it comes to understanding the value of and profoundly influencing the economic viability of cities.
Yeah.
We need legends right now.
We do need legends.
And experts and brilliant folks like Bruce. And he's here today to share his thoughts on how COVID-19 is transforming urban life and what he thinks about our cities will look like in upcoming years.
I'm very interested in that. He's always had future-looking thoughts, and now there's probably a lot of new things coming in.
Future-looking predictions. All right, and then we're going to have the triple crown of community building. Gill, Holland, Mariah, Gratz, and Ashlyn Ackerman to talk about the importance of continuing to cultivate communities with pride in
cities with soul.
That's right. And they're going to be coming to us from the Portland neighborhood in Louisville, where we're working on some exciting stuff coming to you soon from Launchpad. But we're going to hear about what's happening there on the ground in Portland.
Yeah.
So, but before we get started, I wanted to let you know that on June the 21st, Canada, the border between Canada and the U.S. opens.
Oh, that's exciting. So your family, who we were just
They're
talking about
coming.
in the pre-show,
They're just going to be here.
Might be tuned in or watching on Facebook.
Nice.
They're just going to invade the U.S.
I don't think they're going to invade the U.S.
But we are trying to figure out, if you've been following the show, how to see them this summer.
How to see them this
Probably
summer.
on an RV trip or whatnot. We also got another travel update.
Ooh.
A colleague of ours traveled back from Europe. He was in London and traveled back to Nashville.
Essential travel to return home.
To return home with his family and his children. And he said that it was really tough to travel with children. He said there were all kinds of checkpoints and temperatures. And the interesting thing is you have to sign waivers nonstop because, of course,
right.
no airport wants liability that you got COVID in that airport. So if you're going through 4 different airports, you're signing waivers nonstop. And
did they mask up?
And the only airport where people were not wearing masks was Atlanta. So there we are.
There's something to think about. I think that is the reason the Canadians are somewhat avoidant of coming to visit us.
Yeah.
They don't like how we're handling things.
Wear your masks.
Wear your masks. PSA for the day.
Right.
All right. So,
also thoughts on what is this doing for this generation, regardless of how old you are. There's a lot of college graduations.
Yeah.
Obama gave a graduation speech.
Bruce, who's going to be up in a second, was talking about skilling the post-COVID-19 economy.
Yep.
He was talking about newly unemployed, how much, I mean, obviously the rise in unemployment, massive amounts, and now we have a generation of students leaving school.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's time to retool.
It's time to retool. And we've been thinking about what it means for, everybody's thinking about their own context, right? What's it mean for
I was thinking about my niece, Tess.
Yeah.
Tess, who's watching the show right now, but she's in her 3rd year of university in Canada, and she says that they are very fearful of what it's going to be like when they come back into the workforce. First of all, they've lost their internships, right? So obviously being able to get skilled for the workforce through internships and experiences like that. And more importantly, the competition. I remember Generation X always talks about how it was a very competitive environment when they left university, but now it's going to be even more competitive. And likely they're thinking that the class of 2021 is also going to be competing with the class of 2020 if we're all lucky and things come back that fast.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It'll be interesting.
We've also been thinking about it in the context of our 18-month-old.
Yep.
Right? And so we were at the farmer's market this weekend, and there were these 3 little girls that Harper knows-ish, like somewhat recognizes because she's 18 months. But she was checking them out, and they were sort of standing there 6 feet away, and I was in my mask prepared to step in because they've probably been guided to not talk to anyone or engage or touch other folks. And Harper's like getting closer and closer and closer. And I was thinking about it. I was like, God, these kids of this generation, that is an entire generation of young kids under 7 who are going to have a very odd relationship with strangers, and also people wearing masks. Because I think it imprints.
I mean,
there's no way it can't imprint
our
that experience.
natural reaction is to want to go hug people and touch people and be close to each other, and everybody's being
hugs are not free anymore.
not to do that.
They're not free.
Anyway, so we went back to San Francisco.
We did. So we decided that we would get our bikes, and we took the trip back. There was very little traffic, which was obviously odd. And then you kind of drive through the city, and we live in the Mission, so kind of a really hotbed of restaurants and stores and activity.
A lot of boarded up storefronts.
And a lot of boarded up storefronts. You can see just like that impact, like, what are you gonna do? And it was already a high rent area that had gone through gentrification really. And I've been there for a long time, so I wasn't the entire problem.
Everybody's moved out, right? Since they're all work from home, and they've all moved to places like New Orleans and Louisville and Newark.
That is going to be a trend. It is going to be a trend. Not yet. But nonetheless, they're questioning it as the rents are high. It's hard to see. And I think in the cities, you're certainly, it's obviously right in front of you because it's hard to secure that. But that said, that was a little bit sort of sad. See the city. It made me not want to go back to the city anytime soon, to be honest.
But this is an optimistic take, so.
Right, but the thing about it is that what we have been seeing is energy. So this re-energy around getting back to work. People who have been cooped up, there's a sense that like people want to come back.
I don't know if people in the audience are sort of feeling it, and we'll probably hear from Bruce and Gill and Mariah when they're on, but the co-working space that we've been at this entire time, there's people coming in. We're seeing, restaurants are sort of starting to figure out how they're opening back up.
Mode of operation in this space? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
But small businesses are sort of like, okay, we've got to figure something out here, right? We got to. It's not. You're never going to wait for the perfect solution, and the wrong move is, obviously you want to follow your state guidelines, but you can't just sit on your hands. You got to get creative. No,
and I think it is cool. It's a time for people being creative, and I think we've now gotten past that like initial, oh man, we'll save this for Bruce's talk, but like we've gotten past the point where people are like, am I going to get my loan? What am I going to have to do with my staff? Can I pay my rent? All those questions. And I think it's been long enough that people are now sort of thinking like, all right, how do I dig in? For example, we have a winery in town that opened up a bottle shop. So retooled their model for this. They have really cute to-go cups. Mm-hmm. I love the reopening of alcohol on the streets. I think it's an exciting thing.
Everywhere is just going to be New Orleans now.
Yeah, only healthy with good water, infrastructure. I think livability is going to be on the rise, right? So how do cities compete? New Orleans is going to need to compete on livability.
Right. But, one thing that we're thinking about, and, sort of your core customers, it's actually about like relationships. So many small businesses do have, a relationship, a human relationship, and they're, people are coming in and they're like, oh, it's great to see you. Thank you for supporting, right? That's the way it feels when we're ordering delivery and we actually go and we had a 20-minute conversation with the GM. Yeah. He's grateful. Like,
whether it's a little margarita in the bag,
whether it's a dry cleaner or people going and getting their haircut for the first time.
It's a good sense of community, right? It makes you feel like you're connected and you're actually relational, which is why also things like Grubhub feels so
extractive.
Yes, transactional, non-relationship based. And we're seeing the rise of these sort of systems and services that are thinking a little bit about, what about commissionless ordering, right? Why are they extracting so much out of a small business that is actually the one that's doing the creation, right? And platforms that are doing that, I think we're finally getting sort of slap back to that because people care about the company. We
Right.
we actually now just only call the restaurant when we want to make an order because we don't want to give fees to a platform. We want to give fees to the restaurant because we want those workers to be able to come back, that restaurant to come back. And anyway, so we're all coming back. It's very exciting. And one of the things we were talking about was that sort of feeling of how do you connect now and make people feel welcome, because we're coming back online in Tennessee. So we're in Nashville and Memphis, and we're coming back online in New Orleans. And it's exciting, but we're also wanting slowly.
Well, I was going to say we're slipping notes, little personal notes in everybody's mailboxes and
door.
on their door, expressing how we feel. Right? Welcome back. It's good to see you again, even if we're not seeing you and we've been seeing each other virtually.
And people are pumped to see each other.
It's
so
really meaningful that things are coming back this way.
All right, let's move forward to Bruce. Bruce, we're gonna welcome you to the platform. Bruce Katz is the director of the Nowak Metro Finance Lab at Drexel University. He is also the co-founder of New Localism Advisors, where he helps cities design, finance, and deliver transformative initiatives that promote inclusive and sustainable growth. The co-author of 2 books, Bruce is also a former Brookings Institute scholar and the recipient of the prestigious Heinz Award in Public Policy, serving as Chief of Staff to Housing and Urban Development Secretary Henry Cisneros, as well as co-leading the Housing and Urban Issues Transition Team for the Obama administration. Bruce is primed to profoundly impact the economic vitality, livability, and sustainability of cities in a post-COVID world. All right, Bruce.
Oh, go for it.
Keep it rolling.
We are so excited to have you on.
I got to get a different background for these calls. I'm still like, in a pre-Zoom world.
All right.
I got to get one of those, big pictures of Penn Station or something.
I'll tell you this: you got to get a key light. It makes.
Oh wow! Look at that. Okay.
I mean, you don't
need
need
it. Guys.
Right. I need it. Anyway, good. Well, hey, Bruce, we were doing some of the review of some of your writing, which is phenomenal, and I feel like we just have been circling. You guys have had dinner before, but we've been circling around on very similar topics. One of the things that I thought was really cool is you were talking a little bit about the time is now to start thinking not only about relief, but about recovery as well. And I think we saw sort of PPP as this sort of like immediate Band-Aid relief package.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's been lots of writings, and we've talked a lot about sort of the challenges that it was a very privileged distribution of that resource because it relied on banking partnerships that we all know small businesses don't actually have. We talk about our relationship as that with the teller or the ATM, right? Which makes it hard for you to bubble up. So, let's talk a little bit about how you see recovery starting to play out in this post-COVID world. And I say post-COVID because actually it's during COVID, but it's
Right,
nice to
exactly.
we're moving towards a post-COVID world.
Well, I think this crisis has exposed so many of the structural deficiencies in our society. It's exposed a frayed social net. We always talked about, we always knew people are living paycheck to paycheck in the United States. Oh my Lord. I mean, so there is so much pain in our society right now because of what's happening. And we always knew that Black-owned and brown-owned businesses did not have the same access to mainstream financial services. And now with PPP, well, it's played itself out, right? Today, the New York Times had a piece about how so many Black and brown-owned business owners did not apply for it in the first place. They didn't have the friendly banker tell them, you need to do X, you need to do Y, you need to do Z. And then they didn't get the same kind of affirmative response. So bottom line, shame on us if we don't use this crisis to get our shit together in this country. I mean, really, this is just unbelievable. And I think we've already seen signs from the rescue effort that notions like a universal basic income, which was seen as a peripheral kind of notion, crazy idea, is now coming into the center of political thought. that the Danish response or the German response to how we've basically propped up small businesses and their workers clearly seems to work a hell of a lot better than ours. So maybe we can begin to import and adapt and adopt, market-oriented, market-relevant systems that the Northern Europeans and others have done. But I think what this is going to do ultimately is radically restructure the ecosystems we have for business creation, business formation, business expansion. Different data, different financial products, different intermediaries, a whole new kind of entrepreneurial training that expose people to technological possibilities. So let's use this to really change, first and foremost, what we all love about cities. What I love about cities is the authentic, granular, small, right? It's the local. It's not the big box, the chain where you feel like you don't even know where you are, frankly. You feel like you could be anywhere. So what we love about cities, Jane Jacobs wrote about, I keep rereading everything she's written during this crisis. The New York Times and Jane Jacobs, it's the only thing getting me through this. I think we need to really embrace what we mythologized in the United States, but really fail to support with an infrastructure and ecosystem that makes it easy to start and scale businesses.
So let's talk about that, which is this whole idea of, supporting the hyper-local regrowth, which is super important, right? Because as commercial rents go empty, it's easy for big box stores to sort of come in and replace that sort of local vibe, but it actually loses the authenticity and the sort of community aspect of things. Who do you think is going to lead the charge? Or what players are you seeing need to step up and play a role? Because I think we're all sort of we're not under any guise that somehow there's going to be a nationwide, great organized solution to small business and Main Street coming anytime soon. So the rest of us, we are the cavalry. So who do you think are the players that are going to step in and drive that change?
Well, I do think the federal government is important. They are dysfunctional, they are chaotic. They have committed forms of malpractice during this entire exercise, clearly in the executive branch at times in Congress. But their investment, their capital is really critical here. So the last 5 weeks, 6 weeks, I've been working with a bipartisan group of members in the House and the Senate to put together Relief for Main Street Act, introduced by Senator Booker and Senator Daines in the Senate, by Congressman Kildee and Fitzpatrick and others in the House, which would provide the kind of flexible resources to cities, counties, and states so you could top up local relief funds, capitalize community development finance institutions, capitalize micro lenders at scale so that we can begin to both, for those businesses that survive, give them the kind of capital that's fit to purpose, maybe more equity kind of investments than debt, and for new entrepreneurs that hopefully go through some boot camp kind of training, we can bring them back online as quickly as possible. So the federal capital is critical, but ultimately solutions are going to bubble up from the bottom, and the successful places are going to harness that federal capital for local purpose and local growth. So I think we need a new kind of interplay here. We don't need the federal government to come in. This is not the 1950s or 1960s. We're the smartest people in the room. We have all the solutions. Just follow us, and we cookie cutter spread it around the country. The smartest people in the room are local. So let's give them the kind of flexible resources, but let's have a North Star of what kind of economies we're trying to build here. And let's innovate and experiment and codify and routinize and normalize as quickly as we can. But I think this could be an incredible moment for a burst of both product innovation, but also institutional transformation, right? The one thing about the United States, which is so remarkable, is that in the tech sector, you go to any city, advanced research, commercialization, tech transfer, incubators, accelerators, angel seed, series this, series that, It's the most thick and textured system in the world. You go over to neighborhood serving business, locally owned business, entrepreneurs, what do you got? I mean, there ain't a hell of a lot, right? So let's build an ecosystem that's really fit to purpose and fit to scale. So I think this is doable. It's doable in theory, but now we have the crisis, which has exposed all these deficiencies and disparities up the wazoo. So let's act with purpose and intentionality.
Although that's the good thing about the crisis, which is small business has always been such a fragmented market and so vast that it's been very difficult to actually get people to care about solution, because, you know, if you're sort of financially driven, those solutions don't often generate a great bottom line answer. I've done a lot in platforms for small business because I love that, but it's always hard. And so the good news is that with crisis, it shines lights, and it's like, you don't have a choice anymore. We need to figure out that, because it's damaging the fabric of the entire economy, and then that has a trickle down effect.
Absolutely, and I think we're making a shift now from small businesses to business districts, from products for businesses, individual businesses, to places. I mean, it's the sequence of this and the staging of the crisis, so to speak. And we're reminding ourselves that these main streets and commercial corridors and downtowns and university hubs are not just centers of commerce and platforms for revenue generation. They're the centers of our civic and communal life. I mean, this is when we think about cities, we don't think just in the abstract. We're thinking about particular places that we love going to, right? And I do think what's interesting about this period, and this is what really comes out from rereading Jane Jacobs, it's like an urban Bible or something. I think there's so much focus on placemaking and mobility now that we're able to recapture our streets for people rather than cars. But when you read Jane Jacobs, what she really writes about with such eloquence is the granularity and the diversity of business, of small business, and the triumph of the small. And I think we need to balance our urbanist conversation as we move through this crisis. We don't just like cities because we can bike through them. You know, I mean, it's not really the only thing that is attracting us to cities. We can bike in lots of places. What we care about cities is that, you know, incredible authentic culture, and that the feel of people on the street and engaging with each other from different walks of life. It's like a kind of shared democracy that we're not just blowing through. I mean, we're experiencing in walking time.
And that's exactly right, Bruce. I mean, I think, you know, you think about we were talking at the beginning of the show, going back to San Francisco last weekend, and we live near Valencia Street, and we drove down Valencia Street. Valencia Street is a sort of great example of, you know, wonderful bike lanes. It's also had, you know, this edict where there's no chain stores allowed, right? It's only local businesses. That's been, you know, very intention driven. So, you know, I think you're really onto something here in terms of there's been sort of this lifestyle component of bike lanes and mobility and placemaking and parklets. But let's not forget now the rising rents, the people who haven't, you know, the small business owners that weren't able to get a PPP, you know, all of these folks, that's the fabric. That's why we like walking around there. So I guess the question I have for you is, what do you think from a resilience standpoint? We've had a lot of, you know, small business owners that haven't had help in the past. They don't count on it. They don't think the cavalry's coming. To me, you know, we were sort of talking about the importance of welcoming our own customers back with Launchpad and really that human to human interaction. Do you think that we'll see this resilience? Sort of like we need business resilience and people to come back out and open their doors and storefronts. And then we've got the other job is the resources, and get the resources to them so that they can survive. But how do you think, you know, the mindset is in this moment, or you know?
Well, I think we've got to learn from this experience and the PPP experience and realize that a lot of these very small businesses need support, and not just financial support. They need help navigating through this unprecedented crisis. So that's why the most recent piece I wrote with a bunch of colleagues is around the notion of Main Street Regenerators.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have some kind of collective institutional infrastructure in the US with bids and lids and SIDS, and every place calls them something different, but they're essentially merchant associations that do clean and safe and do branding and marketing. I think we need to move towards a more collective platform, almost a carpet underneath our main streets, so that common services like deep cleaning can be purchased in bulk. We can deal with this technology digital divide, which is not just between different parts of cities, but different kinds of businesses, really. And maybe we'll move to some back office, common financing, accounting, tax prep, hiring. But if we think every tub on its own bottom is going to bring us back, we're delusional. I mean, we need to build this kind of infrastructure and capitalize it, both with national resources, but with local resources. Because the death of Main Street, the psychological impact on this country would be overwhelming, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an iconic view of who we are as Americans. And again, why we love everything from a rural town to a major city. And so consumer confidence is going to be dramatically affected, as well as income and wealth building, unless we're very purposeful about what we're building back here. And I think, we've allowed the large to crush the small for decades in this country. We've bought into a certain kind of theory of capitalism, which is not practiced by the Germans or the Danes or others, right? So it's not like this is inevitable, what has happened in this country. So we should be thinking at policy level, as you said, with Valencia Street, celebrating small business and actually putting them at the top of the pyramid, as opposed to an afterthought. The SBA, are we kidding ourselves? I mean, this is like a peripheral federal agency, right? If we want to basically show our commitment to a different kind of economy, let's make a small business administration, or whatever we want to call it, the centerpiece of the beginning of the next administration. I think this, this is like a get a grip time, and we should be taking all these lessons from this horrendous crisis and its multiple implications. It's exacerbating racial and ethnic disparities at a scale which is really unimaginable. So let's take this and remake it.
Yeah.
Bottom up, because that's where the expertise, frankly, lies here.
Yeah.
Well, it's been interesting, and I like your view on we should think about sort of the positive impacts of what we can actually enact in terms of change. And one of the things that I think is interesting is this just general pride in your sense of place that's starting to evolve, right? And so as we stop commuting for our jobs, as we stop thinking that getting on a plane is just a natural instinct that you do every week, it's forcing us to actually think about where we live, the community in which we live, and the strength of that community. And so I think, using that as the zeitgeist for change, becomes really interesting, because you care about not the places that you drive across town to, but the places that you can walk to from your home, and all the livability factors that we've been seeing. And with opportunity zones, one of the things I always said was, like it or love it or hate it, it's shining a light on areas of the country that we want to focus and put energy behind. And those are local, oftentimes they're downtown or they're rural areas, and the sort of this, I see that zeitgeist of people wanting to have that pride of place and that sense. And so it seems like the time is right for that to be the trend.
And I think what's interesting about Senator Booker and Senator Daines getting behind this Relief for Main Street Act is this disaster is a unifying event. When we have hurricanes or floods or other natural disasters, it's always what's happening in Florida or New Orleans or Hurricane Sandy. And this is a hurricane that's happening everywhere in the United States for an uncertain period of time. Everyone is affected. And place is a unifying notion, whether it's a rural Main Street, whether it's a commercial corridor in a inner city neighborhood, whether it's a downtown in a big, medium, or small city. This should be a unifying moment. Obviously, it's a very partisan period. We have a small thing called an election in a couple months. Everyone go out and vote. I'm not sure how we're going to vote, but go do it. But we need to take this as a possibility, as a moment to unite rural, exurban, suburban, urban around a new kind of place-making and economy shaping and skills building. That should be the purpose here. And you know, I tend to be optimistic. I learned that from Henry Cisneros, who was my boss at HUD. I mean, we can all drown in problem definition, but we should be focusing on practicable, actionable, replicable, scalable solutions. So let's like really use this period to put those forward.
You know, Bruce, one bright spot in our DNA, in our history of Launchpad, we were born out of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. And
Right.
you know, one of the things that happened that we experienced in New Orleans during that time was, you know, when you have a hurricane, which, you know, I think there is an analogy that, you know, everything shuts down and, you know, it's just everybody was evacuated. The entire city of New Orleans was evacuated. So if you went back to New Orleans, you were going back by choice, right? So the people who came back at that time, if you really, you know, if you just need to get a job or get your family, a lot of people were displaced and moved to Houston, moved to Atlanta. So if you went back, you made a very purposeful decision. And so that led to this tremendous energy and pride in how do we rebuild this city, not back to what it once was, but back to what we want it to be. And if that energy that we were sort of reflecting on, that we were seeing, you know, around here, oh, you know, let me try to order through your website on a commissionless system. So the money's not going to Grubhub, it's going to you, restaurant. If we all take that collective pride in our own communities and where we live, and then there's the you know, resources that are, you know, brought into, you know, the local governments and sort of the ideas. I like the bottom-up approach. I've always been a bottom-up guy. You know, maybe we can get there, because I think that potential to lose it, seeing your Main Street potentially go away if it's been boarded up, if that doesn't catalyze people giving a damn, then I don't know what will, right?
Well, we've got to take the lessons from markets, which is reduce friction and routinize and make efficient activity, right? Cities are very complex organisms, actually. They don't segregate uses, right? Like many other parts of the country. Everything's just sort of mashed up because it really, it's almost, you know, sort of a just basic understanding of that's how you co-create and co-invent and make progress, right? It's not by separate, it's by unifying. So I think we're gonna have to take lessons here about how we embrace market mechanisms in ways that the late 20th century basically rejected. The late 20th century perfected sprawl and perfected segregation and perfected stratification. It's built into our markets. Well, now we're going to have to make mixed use and Black-owned business and Latino-owned business and local-owned business, right, as easier to do, you know, and easier to access than the rest of, you know, the system. So, you know, you can't just be delusional about this at the end of the day. I mean, we have to be hyper pragmatic and hyper concrete. We can all agree to some, you know, 10,000 foot set of principles or goals, but the doing of it has to basically take what we've learned from market dominance and adapt it to what we want and what we care for. And regulation is going to be critical here because, frankly, you know, why does small business exist at the level it does in Northern Europe? because they regulate out certain things and they regulate in other things, right? So these are choices we have to make, which means in the political marketplace, we have to eventually vote, you know, with the scale that has impact.
Yeah, I think that was a good, interesting perspective on the regenerators when we read that article is the tools that are needed to rebuild and sustain Main Street and those businesses there are different than the ones we're used to, right? And so the idea of bringing to bear, so you know, if you're a large organization, I even think, yeah, if you're WeWork versus Launchpad, right? You have infrastructure and staffing and resources and departments that all sort of think about every aspect of the business, from revenue maximization to risk to control to accounting to finance. A small business doesn't have access to any of those things. And a small business that is underrepresented or financially, what's the word? Financially, well, there we go. Smooth move, Driscoll. Financially challenged or vulnerable isn't going to have those resources and tools. And so I liked that concept of, you know, how do we actually find leaders, and they could be national, bringing to bear systems and policies and processes that a Main Street or a city can employ, because otherwise every single city comes up with their own idea and creates our own crappy Squarespace website for what the resources look like, when there could be maybe one or two or three. But the idea is that you have to look for leaders who care about the redevelopment, who care about supporting businesses, who are non-transactional in that approach. And I think that that message is really powerful, because it feels like, and this is something that on our soapbox I always am frustrated by, is that we as cities we don't actually compete with each other on the day-to-day of what we do. We compete within ourselves around the fight for resource, or the fight for political gain, or the fight for social capital. And in fact, like, now is not the time for the fight. Now is the time for collaboration, for a true North Star, for support for the greater good. And we can learn that from other cities, where it's easier because we're not fighting with them against that. And I love the message of Main Street Regenerators, because I think that gives a sense of, like, we're not placemaking for one person's benefit. We're not doing this for a commercial real estate person. We're actually placemaking to create a stronger ecosystem within that either community, that city, that town, that rural area. And
I mean, the models exist, all right? And there are models in the United States that just may not exist at scale, but there are innumerable cooperative and collaborative models that exist in other parts of the world that we can bring here. And there are international development models. I mean, good portions of the United States, to be frank, look like an emerging market. They don't look like a first world economy, right? They look like a different kind of place. We just haven't focused on it very much. So we could be learning about a lot of, development corporations and development banks, and how that might be a new model. So we should take off the blinders now. I mean, this has been a shock of monumental proportions, but it's revealed what we already knew, frankly. And we were letting the limits of our politics and the partisan and polarized nature of our discourse impede our ability to basically design, finance, and deliver transformation at scale. There is no excuse now. Will that happen at the national level? God only knows, right? Local level, there will definitely be a group of first movers. There will definitely be a group of cities that basically say, why not? It's like New Orleans after post-Katrina. Why not? What the hell do we have to lose here? Yeah. So let's put ourselves on the global map, you know? So I feel like we're about to experience a real burst of innovation. Capital is not really the constraint right now. Our imagination is, and our sense of limits, politically and otherwise, is more the constraint than capital.
All right, well, we're gonna leave it there, Bruce, because you just gave us, we're ending on an inspirational moment. I completely agree. Now is the time for creative thinking. And by the way, I love the fact the solutions and the answers are not going to come from the coast. These are not going to be solutions that New York and San Francisco come up with. They might have tools to provide, but it's actually going to be looking into momentum markets, cities with people with pride, cities with soul. But we're going to be looking at markets that are thinking about their Main Street, thinking about how they become competitive, thinking about these things. And I think the exciting work is going to be done not on the coast, but actually in the middle of the country.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to be with you guys, even virtually.
Likewise, Bruce.
Look forward to seeing you face to face whenever this nutty crisis passes.
Yeah.
We do too. And we'll
maybe mask to mask.
We'll be following relief for Main Street Act and your work on the new localism, and Ariel will put into the chat box where to subscribe to your newsletter and kind of keep up with what's going on with you.
It was great to see you.
Thanks so much for being here. We're going to let you go.
All right, we'll talk about a city that's thinking forward about the future and transforming what Louisville is. So we are going to be talking to the Louisville team.
Yeah.
We are excited to welcome this team of experts who are passionate about improving the quality of life and opportunities in the Portland neighborhood of Louisville. Through the revitalization of the built environment, they are forming dynamic mixed-use neighborhoods full of character, stories, and vibrancy. Today, they're here to offer their thoughts on how cities on the rise can keep their momentum going to go beyond survival and thrive. All right, let's welcome Mariah, Gill, and Ashlyn Ackerman. Hi, guys.
Hello. Hello.
All right, we got you guys.
It's good to see everybody. I hope everyone's staying well and good over there in Louisville. Gill, where are you?
I'm trying to get my video.
All right, well, we lost Gill.
We'll bring Gill in.
Here he
there we
goes.
go. So we were in your wonderful city just over a year ago, and unfortunately, I guess it's not a derby year this year, but it was wonderful to be there last year. And how's everything going in Louisville right now? How are you guys weathering the storm?
Well, as you can see, Ashlyn went ahead and decorated for Derby as her background, even though she can't. We couldn't have Derby.
If you can't tell, I'm in Louisville. That'll give it away.
That'll give it away.
That is a hat wall.
Last year.
No, I think things are going well. You know, we've been shut down since March 15th in a lot of ways, and you know, our team definitely switched to working from home. We've tried to figure out with our property management team how to deal with being safe on job sites and how to keep our buildings safe. So that's been a learning experience. And I think we're looking forward to starting to lighten up and hopefully open up more, and then figuring out what the future really holds for us moving forward, and how COVID ultimately changes the way people live, work, and play, or doesn't.
So I don't know if you guys got to hear the first part with Bruce. I'm sure you did. I saw you were on. But he talked about the importance of sort of regenerators, and what that to me brings to mind is sort of the sense of placemaking that you guys have thought about when it comes to the Portland neighborhood. And Gill, I know you have been the fire starter around activating that. And so I'd love to hear kind of how you guys are thinking about Portland, what's going on there. I know there's been some new and exciting evolution, and we're excited to join you in Portland. So Gill, why don't you give us a quick update on how that's going and how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, so, you know, the Portland neighborhood is the historic sister city of Louisville. People used to get out of the boat in Louisville and portage around to Portland because the Falls of the Ohio is the only naturally occurring obstacle in 981 miles of the Ohio River. So the Portland neighborhood, I always joke, is probably the most resilient. You know, Bruce was talking about urban resiliency and consumer resiliency. And I'm like, I've always said the Portland neighborhood is the most resilient neighborhood in America, probably because the flood of 37, lots of people said, you know, Louisville should be abandoned. It was way worse than Katrina. at the time, and then there was a flood of 1945, and then and that cut Portland off from its historic, maritime heritage, and it's faced all these kind of challenges. So, in general, we think COVID is not. It seems like COVID is much more dealable with than some of these other challenges. It's a historic. If you talk to the new urbanists, what they want to build is a new version of the Portland neighborhood.
All right.
And some of the things that we were talking about with Bruce are exactly what are being worked on in Portland. Gill, and I know you're leading a lot of this, but the proximity of the neighborhood to sort of downtown and Distillers Row and a lot of the CBD, it's actually very proximate, but it's one of those neighborhoods that has sort of been cut off in a sense over a previous generation. Lack of investment and redlining would be one impact, a freeway, another impact. And now there's a lot of sort of remediation effort and sort of cityscape to connect the neighborhood back, because it is a very proximate neighborhood.
Yeah, there's a $35 million, the final phase of the Waterfront Park. So for years, Louisville never embraced its waterfront, despite being, a lovely town on this beautiful Ohio River. And over the last 40 years, there's been hundreds of millions of dollars invested in waterfront parks. And the final phase 4 is, of course, the final phase, which is the only phase west of 9th Street in the Portland neighborhood. And that is now kicking off. $35 million, 22 acres. So the first half of that, I think, is deliverable in about 9 months. So there's lots of great activity. And, even just the property values, we do what we call urban acupuncture. So we go around and try to target the most under-leveraged properties, or the worst, house that used to be a crack den, and we fix them up. That way we get a double positive ripple effect for our investment. So property values have doubled, but they're still, the rents haven't gone up because they don't have to go up, and the property values will still probably double again in the next 5 years. And then that'll get us to a much more fair market valuation. And yes, you're right, we are 5 blocks from downtown.
Right, amazing.
With amazing stock.
Right.
Yeah, over half the buildings in Portland are over 100 years old. I mean, the whole neighborhood is on the National Historic Preservation District.
It's a really exciting place, and we're excited to be partners with you guys. And why don't we just, Mariah, I had some questions for you around kind of in this post-COVID world eventually that we'll be in, but how are you thinking about kind of building design and density and how people are going to be, as you said, live, work, and play now? What sort of things are you thinking about, and best practices are you seeing out there?
Sure. So that's something we've been talking about a lot in our office. It's kind of a daily conversation at this point, and my team's been doing a lot. Yeah, sorry. It's been a daily conversation on Zoom since we're not in the office together. So we, I think one of the things that we were really looking at, and I was on a webinar last week that was really interesting, and one of the speakers said, I think there's a lot of the finality that people are talking about right now. The office has never come back, and retail has never come back, and all of this has never come back. And I don't think that all that's true. So I think one of the things we've been really trying to look at is, short term, what's it going to look like and what's not going to be there? Midterm, what does that look like? And long term, what does that look like? So what are going to be the things like 80-story, 200-story high rises that people after 9/11 said are never going to be built again, but then were? And then what are going to be the things like airports, which have never been the same since 9/11? And how are those things going to shift? So that's one of the reasons I wanted Ashlyn to be on here with me. Is she's one of our design leads, and she's been doing a lot of work kind of looking at the impact of different things, especially in kind of the co-working office space, and how that might shift kind of both short term and long term, so that we can plan accordingly in our new buildings.
Sure, yeah, I can touch on that a little bit. I do a lot of thinking about a lot of different modes of all of live, work, play. We're not just office and that type of developer. We do multifamily, we do restaurant and retail, and a fair amount of office space and some event spaces. So, thinking about the way people are living nowadays, and this has forced me to sort of reanalyze that you got to find a room in your house that can be a home office. And if you've got children, you've got to find somewhere that they can do their schoolwork. And where's your home gym right now if you can't go to Planet Fitness or wherever. So you really think about, in the past few years, it seems offerings, we really tried to make them smaller, more efficient, but good layouts. And now we're thinking about, how do we make this a place that's more multifunctional and is not just a place for people to sleep, eat, room, things like that. And then in relation to the offices, it's a similar mode where people are going to start coming back to the offices primarily because they're craving that in-person collaboration and those sort of happenstance conversations and things like that just don't happen via Zoom. We've noticed that on some of our design charrettes and things that are going on. You just don't get that same level of candor and brainstorming that you do when everybody's sitting around a table with a bottle of bourbon. So, it's thinking about how do we privatize spaces even in the office for folks to have, oh yeah, there you go. But we're trying to privatize spaces so that people feel safe and secure in the cleanliness of their environment, and they have some control over some personal space, but really making those conference rooms and collaboration spaces intentional and feeling like it is a place that folks can come together, even if that happens less often now.
I think that's interesting, is like some of the ways that we can think about office space. I always think about it in a positive sense, right? Creative spaces, right? So this sort of natural ebb and flow of people coming in, how do you actually design spaces that are going to foster that? And I think as you think about it, like people are like, oh, we'll put plexiglass up, and you're kind of like, the horror. So how are you thinking about some of the more creative interpretations of what people are going to want? I mean, honestly, Gill's got art galleries all over Portland. That would be an amazing bookable space that teams would want to come to and be surrounded by art. It could be a whole new revenue stream for an art gallery that may be offline on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, and they can now all of a sudden host teams coming together to engage and collaborate.
I mean, we did take advantage of this time to start the Portland Sculpture Garden. So the first lovely Dave Caudill sculpture went out at 25th and Montgomery Street, and where there's a Betsy Towns coming in next week. So that's kind of one initiative we took that was outdoor, so properly socially distant, and already people are really, really cottoning to it.
I bet they are. Ashley?
I think that's a good point. And event spaces are definitely going to be one of the last things that come back online. So we're really starting to think outside, especially now that it's spring and summer, and it's a great time to be outside in a lot of cities. So how can we maybe take over a lane of parking on the street to expand our cafes, or take the co-working model and have the outdoor conference room, because we're able to be in larger groups outdoors and spread out a little bit more. So, we're urban developers, and we're looking for any opportunity to create that pocket park next to the office, just to get folks to be outside and engage.
And the great thing there, if I can jump in, we hosted the Congress for New Urbanism National Convention last year, and out of CNU came 2 pocket park designs for the Portland neighborhood, which are now both in early stages of implementation, which is exactly what Ashton said, taking one lane of Main Street between 10th and 15th, turning that into parks, bike lanes, and then taking 10th Street in front of Peerless Distillery, which is the first stop on the Urban Bourbon Trail, from Main Street down to Waterfront Park, the final phase 4. It's going to be super cool.
That's amazing.
That's great. Well, I'm interested in your reaction to this. We see a lot of the dynamics that we've already been sort of banking on accelerating. The you know, on a national level, so many companies, you know, like Twitter and, you know, a number of the tech companies are making decisions that, hey, you can work remotely forever, right? You don't have to be in San Francisco anymore to work for, you know, companies like that. So, you know, we definitely see, you know, the acceleration of people being able to move to a city that, you know, matches their lifestyle, that, you know, maybe where they have, you know, family or, you know, parents or support if you're raising a family, cities that are more affordable to buy a house, and you know, sort of that rise of remote work. So this, you know, nature of, you know, working entrepreneurially, I think is only going to be accelerated by, you know, by this COVID crisis.
And I mean, Louisville is a great example of that.
Exactly.
Well, and the historic shotgun house, of which we, you know, after Hurricane Katrina, we now have more shotgun houses in Louisville than any other city in America. And for a couple or a single person, the shotgun house is a perfect 2-bedroom. You make 1 bedroom the office for remote work. You live in the other, and you have a great house in a walkable neighborhood.
It's amazing. Out of curiosity, I can't remember. Does Louisville have? Is it a Google Fiber city, or does it have good broadband throughout?
We were a Google Fiber city, and then they have left. But we're working on our broadband reach right now. So
you got abandoned by Google Fiber? What did you do, Mariah?
But I was gonna say, I was on a call last week with some developers out of New York, and you know, a lot of them, they're worried about how they're ever going to get people to come back to the office. You know, they don't want to take public transportation, they're scared of it, they don't want the density. How do you deal with social distancing in a tower that's 80 stories tall? Like, you'd have lines 4 hours long for people to get up and down the elevators. And I'm sitting on this call and I'm saying, well, just come to Louisville. Like, we don't have those problems. You know, our tallest building that we manage is tall. That's a good exercise for your morning and your afternoon. Just go up down the stairs. So all of these things, like, yeah, you should move to Louisville. Yeah, you should move to Louisville.
And the Portland neighborhood, it's flat, it's walkable.
Definitely bikeable. I want to see those bike share programs pop up in front of our spaces. And I mean, if you're in New York, it's kind of like you're in the Flatiron District anyway. So
yeah,
exactly.
No, I mean, that's sort of the spirit of what we've been talking about, is the rise of the lifestyle city. And the reality is people are going to want to live where they want to live. I mean, that doesn't have to be dictated anymore by work. And I think it's, you know, it's easy to have cognitive confirmation bias. Where are my words today? Confirmation bias around it's going to go back to the way I want it to be. It never goes back. It always goes forward, right? And so at this point, this is an opportunity for us, and I think it's an opportunity for lifestyle cities to identify what are those things that become attractants of talent, attractants of businesses, and not focused on sort of attracting like HQ2. It's actually attracting talented, entrepreneurial folks who are going to come and be net positive to the community. Positive to the entrepreneurs there. I feel like Louisville is a good example. Very well placed to do that. I mean, you've got Gill.
well, and plus give a shout out to Louisville Independent Business Alliance. You know, I think there's over 1,000 members of our local, you know, business, and in the Portland neighborhood as well as the Nulu neighborhood before, not one chain. We never embrace. I mean, we didn't necessarily. Well, we did keep out the Family Dollar, but we certainly, it's all about family-owned business and neighbor business and small businesses, some of which are growing quite rapidly now.
You know, that's interesting, and Bruce highlighted in the last segment how important those, you know, sort of small business associations, you know, neighborhood associations are going to be, because they are, you know, they have the relationships into these communities. They can, you know, disperse support or you know, marshal resources. So yeah, good shout out there. And I think we're all sort of anticipating that pendulum swinging the direction that we're probably all believers in terms of the support of small businesses and local businesses, and not a chain store on every corner. Great historic buildings coming into commerce as they live, work, and play, and creating these wonderful walkable neighborhoods. Just what you're doing there.
All right. Well, we're at time. It was a real treat to get to see you guys. We can't wait to see you in person. We're so happy to have you guys as partners. Delighted to have Louisville, a future member of the Launchpad Network.
Yeah.
As we come online, we're really excited about the project there in Portland, and grateful for the teamwork here.
Yeah.
That was a
Go Launchpad.
more energized this week. I feel more energized. I mean, Bruce has us thinking positively about the future of small business in Main Street. You guys have us thinking positively about great cities across the U.S. I'm ready.
All right, we're gonna let you guys off the hook here. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we'll hope to see you guys all soon.
Fantastic.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think we captured
I feel like we're back.
the energy that I think we've been feeling and seeing and nurturing. We need to keep that energy up. Everybody needs to stay safe and wear your masks, but it's good to see people back on the streets again and have people in co-working spaces. And
I thought one thing we didn't touch on with Bruce was it's not a simple flip the switch, right?
No.
We're not back.
Yeah.
Not done. But I think we need these moments where we're re-energizing, we're getting some oxygen, probably some fresh air, getting our creative juices going so that we can prepare ourselves for the next wave and the next wave and the next wave. And thankful to have folks like Mariah and Gill and Ashlyn and Bruce on our team. And it's been a great show.
Yeah. All right. Well, as you said, thank you to Ashlyn, Mariah, Gill, and Bruce. Thank you to Ariel, our producer. Thank you to Scott Shallett. Thank you to the whole Launchpad team, Kendall, Ella, Serena, everybody watching, who's making it happen. And we will see everybody on Thursday for another great episode of Lifestyle Business. Same time, same place, noon Pacific, 2 Central on Thursday afternoon. We'll see you then.
All right. Thanks, guys.